The boards beneath my boots made a sound they never should have. I'd been walking this barn floor since I was tall enough to carry a feed bucket, and in all those years it had never once echoed like that, not even during the spring floods when the soil swelled underneath like a breath held too long. But today, after a storm cracked the post on the southwest corner, I heard it, hollow, clean, like someone had carved out the ground and set a stage under my grandfather's foundation. I knelt, ear pressed to the warped pine, and tapped my knuckle against the planks. Thunk, thunk, then thump. A low cavity answered me back, deep and unnatural, the kind of sound that doesn't belong under packed earth. Granddad built this barn himself in '83. Langston hands raised every beam, or so I'd always believed. I fetched a crowbar from the tack room, wiped sweat from my neck, and wedged it under the board. It gave easily, too easily, like it had been lifted before. Then another, and another. Beneath the boards, a rectangular cutout of framed wood, neatly reinforced, leading down into shadow. I stared for a long time, blinking at the impossible. There was no dirt beneath the floor, no rock, just a wooden staircase descending into the dark. A cold breath ran over my spine. I fetched a box of matches from the saddlebag, struck one. It flared orange against the stale black, barely touching the walls, which were paneled, not rough-hewn or dug through soil. These were smoothed, nailed, built, professionally, carefully, and with a purpose no one had told me about. Every step creaked like a question. I don't know what I expected at the bottom. A root cellar, maybe a moonshine still from Prohibition days, but what I saw was clean, functional, lined with timber, and smelling of dust, salt, and old sweat. And then I saw them. Footprints. Not mine. Not old. Dust disturbed, mud still flaking. Someone had been here, recently, and not just once. They'd used this path more than I had ever used the main house door. My chest tightened. That's when the truth hit. This wasn't just a secret. It was active. Someone had been living in my family's shadows long before I noticed the floor echo. I lit another match, then another. My legs moved before my mind caught up. Because I wasn't just scared anymore. I was furious. This was my land, my inheritance, and suddenly I wasn't sure how much of it had ever truly belonged to me. But I kept walking anyway, down the hall, deeper into the dark, each match a flicker of defiance, every step pressing into ground I'd been born on but never owned in truth. The Langston name was supposed to mean something out here. Now I wasn't so sure it ever had.
The hallway ended in a solid wood door with an iron handle, smooth from use. Not rusted, not dusty. My fingers hesitated before I pushed it open. The room was lit, dimly, by a thin shaft of sunlight slipping through a vent in the ceiling. It must have led somewhere, maybe the old well shaft. But I didn't look up. I couldn't. My eyes were locked on the scene before me. A chair sat beside a small writing desk. A chipped porcelain cup rested on its surface, faint steam still rising from the last of its contents. A crust of bread sat bitten on a plate. On the bed, a simple cot tucked against the far wall. Worn blankets still held the shape of a human body, like someone had only just gotten up. Books lined the shelves, a stack of journals, yellowed maps, a lantern still warm to the touch. I stepped closer and picked up a leather-bound volume. Stamped on the inside cover, Property of Samuel Langston, 1851. My grandfather's name. And the date, nearly 30 years before he was even born. My throat dried up. I opened another book, and another, all signed the same. I turned back to the desk, A metal lockbox sat half open. Inside, folded deeds, ledgers, and correspondence, all with my family's seal. But what stopped my heart cold was a black and white photograph tucked in the corner. 3 men stood shoulder to shoulder, dressed in dusters and wide-brim hats, each wearing the same half-smile, like they knew something the rest of the world didn't. On the back, in neat ink, "The agreement holds. No one speaks. 1852." My legs gave out, and I sat hard in the chair. The same chair, probably, that had held my father, his father, or someone else entirely. Everything I knew about this ranch, about my legacy, hinged on the belief that the Langstons built it from scratch. No secrets, no partners, no buried contracts and lockboxes beneath the ground. But this room lived without me. It breathed behind my back for decades, maybe longer. The old stories of our land being untouched were just that, stories, carefully shaped like a corral to keep wild truths fenced in. I leafed through a folded sheet tucked into the ledger. Deeds signed not just by Samuel Langston, but also Thomas Harrow and William Cross. That made 3 men, 3 last names, and 1 secret. One they'd buried so deep, even time had to whisper to find it. I could have gone back up, nailed the boards shut, pretended I saw nothing, but I didn't. I took the photo, the note, the ledger. Then I turned down the next passage beyond the cot, lighting another match. Because if my life was built on a lie, I'd rather burn it down than live in it blind.
The matches flickered fast now. I lit one after another as I followed the narrow corridor curving left, then down. Whoever built this place had carved a maze with purpose. Everything about it felt intentional, like a hidden house beneath the house. The air changed too. It wasn't just cooler, it carried the faintest scent of perfume and ink. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Above me. Slow. Heavy. Measured. I froze, every muscle taut. The barn boards creaked just once, and then a voice called out, low, clear, unmistakably female. "Derek Langston?" I gripped the iron poker I'd picked up in the side hall. "Who's down here?" I shouted. No reply. Just more steps. Then the trapdoor above creaked open, and a face peered down. Not frightened, not surprised. It was a woman in her mid-30s, auburn hair tied back, dust on her boots, but a courthouse folder tucked neatly under her arm. She dropped into the tunnel like she knew it better than I did. "You're Derek," she said. "You've got a name for me. I want yours." "Olivia Harrow." Harrow. The name hit like a branding iron. My fingers tightened around the poker. She saw the change in my face. "I'm not here to hurt you. I came for what my family is owed." I didn't answer. She opened the folder and pulled out a yellow document sealed with 3 faded wax impressions. Contract of co-ownership, signed by Samuel Langston, Thomas Harrow, and William Cross, 1852. I took it from her hand. My name stared back at me in script not unlike my grandfather's, but there were 2 others beside it. And under that, said agreement remains binding for 99 years, after which all parties or descendants may claim full ownership only if present and unanimous. I did the math in my head, which meant the clause expired this year. And we were standing right on top of the clock.
She pulled out another paper. My lawyer found it 6 months ago, buried in a probate file in Wichita. We were told it was just a legend, a family story, but then I came here and found this. She held up the same photograph I had in my coat pocket. 3 men in hats, standing in front of the old barn before it had a roof. The ground beneath me shifted again. Not physically, but in every other way. My land wasn't mine. It was on loan. A ticking fuse lit by dead men. "You knew about the tunnel?" I asked. "No," Olivia said, serious now. "I knew about the agreement. I didn't expect to find a door in your barn floor." I studied her face. She looked like a school teacher, not a thief. Still, I didn't trust her. Not yet. But she had papers, signatures, my own bloodline burned into ink alongside hers. She glanced behind me. "We should look deeper. If there's a truth here, it's buried." I didn't want to like her, but I didn't want to be a fool more. So I nodded, and we walked deeper together, past the cot, past the books, into the next sealed corridor. The matches were burning faster now, but I had the feeling we were just getting warm. The tunnel opened wider the farther we walked, the air shifting from musty silence to something more lived in, almost managed. The planked walls gave way to stonework, stacked and mortared like a wine cellar. Someone had spent serious time down here. Olivia walked beside me, her eyes sharp and mouth set like a woman used to arguing with men twice her size. She didn't talk much, but when she did, it cut. "How long have you lived here?" she asked. "Born here. This land's been in my family 3 generations. She nodded slowly. "Mine never made it past the stories, just talk of a deal made in smoke and whiskey, sealed underground by men who feared the world above." I thought it was poetic nonsense. We reached a dead end. At least it looked like one. A flat wall of boards bolted with iron. Then we heard it. Hooves. Above ground at first, muffled by dirt and distance, then they circled closer. 3, maybe 4 horses. Then voices. Men. And then, unmistakably, boots on the tunnel floor behind us. I spun around, poker ready. Olivia stepped in front of me like she'd been expecting it. A man stepped into the lamplight. Mid-60s, tall, weather-worn, and calm like a winter creek. 2 younger men flanked him, rifle slung casually but not idly. "Derek Langston," the older man said. "I'm Marcus Cross, and this is our family's hallway." "Bit crowded for a hallway," I said. "Not if it's built to last." Marcus didn't raise his voice. Didn't need to. He looked at me like he already knew what I'd seen, and that he'd seen more. He reached into his coat and pulled out a brass key. Fit it into a socket hidden behind a loose stone in the dead-end wall. A lock clicked. The boards folded inward, silent on iron hinges, revealing a door I would have sworn wasn't there minutes ago. "Come on," Marcus said. "You'll want to see this." I glanced at Olivia. Her jaw tightened, but she followed. The chamber beyond was larger than any yet, wide enough to ride a horse through. Shelves lined the walls, some collapsed, others stocked with rusted tools, lanterns, and crates labeled in hand-painted script. But most of the space was empty. Too empty. Wooden stands sat bare, metal brackets without contents, floor dust disturbed in long, neat tracks. This was our vault. Vault. For what? Records, ledgers, coin, property notes, bonds, tools, contracts,
Anything valuable we needed off the books. And it's all gone, I said. He nodded. Stripped clean in the last 3 months. By who? He looked at Olivia. Don't you dare, she snapped. I found my way here chasing papers in courthouses, not empty vaults. I stepped back, heart hammering. You said a lawyer sent you? She hesitated. He found me, sent a letter to my father's old address in Topeka. Name was Elias Monroe. Said he had information about our shared claim. Marcus crossed his arms. There ain't no Elias Monroe in the Kansas bar. Checked it myself. My stomach dropped. Long vacant office, Marcus added. Found it. Boarded up. No forwarding address. A silence fell. This wasn't about 3 families anymore. Someone else had been watching all of us, and they'd been first.
The 3 of us stood in that gutted chamber, staring at the dust outlines of a past none of us had been allowed to inherit. Where shelves once sagged with weight, now only ghosts remained, raked clean by a hand that moved faster, earlier, and smarter. What kind of person empties a vault like this and leaves no trace? I muttered. Olivia knelt near a set of gouged floorboards. Not no trace, she said quietly. She pulled something from the crack between 2 boards, a strip of paper curled with moisture and dust. I crouched beside her as she unrolled it. A shipment ledger, dated June 4th, just 3 months back. 6 crates, no contents listed. Destination, a rail station in San Luis. Consignee, M. Monroe. Marcus leaned over us, lips thinning. The man doesn't exist, but he sure moves quick. We were never supposed to find this, Olivia said. He counted on that. She looked shaken now, and I didn't blame her. We were dealing with someone who had watched 3 bloodlines sleep through their own story. Someone with a head start on a plan. And maybe a grudge. Could be blackmail, Marcus offered, or maybe just money. I shook my head. This ain't some petty thief. This is engineered. This man had to know the tunnel system, the records, the expiry date on the agreement. Hell, he probably read more Langston papers than I ever did. Marcus grunted. You said your lawyer sent you the agreement, he said to Olivia. Was it original? No, she admitted. Photocopy. He said the original would be presented once I arrived. I stared at her. You trusted that? I was desperate, she snapped. You think this was my dream, crawling through tunnels with a poker and a stranger named Langston? That hit harder than it should have. We didn't speak for a long moment. Then Olivia reached into her satchel and pulled out something I hadn't seen before. A small velvet bag. She emptied it into her palm. A signet ring, ornate, gold, carved with 3 symbols, Langston's cross spade and hammer, Harrow's sheaf of wheat, and Cross's anvil. Where'd you get that? Marcus asked, eyes narrowing. It was mailed to my father after he died. No return address. Just said, ask about the land beneath your feet. Same symbols on the lockbox, I said slowly. We all looked at each other. There was no denying it anymore. This wasn't just a theft. It was a play, generations in the making. And the ring, that wasn't a threat. It was an invitation. You think Monroe's real name starts with E? I asked. Olivia's face was pale. Marcus turned toward the exit. I know someone who might. Who? Elena Vasquez, he said. That name stopped us cold. My granddad mentioned her once, only once. Said her family used to work this land, way back when, ranch hands, quiet folk. Not all of them, Marcus said. Her grandfather was killed here in 1852. I blinked. Killed? Went missing, officially. But I've heard the stories.
Buried secrets, a fight over treasure. The last time 3 men signed a deal and swore silence, another man vanished. Olivia's eyes widened. You think Monroe's working for her? I think, Marcus said grimly, we're all about to find out. The silence in the tunnel broke like a mirror, slow applause echoing from the stone corridor behind us. It was the kind of sound that didn't belong in this century, not down here, not in the gut of the earth where secrets slept. We turned as one, the poker still in my hand, Marcus raising his lantern, Olivia already backing toward the wall. Out of the dark stepped a woman. She was no older than 40, dark hair pulled into a low braid, shoulders squared and eyes like river stones, polished, unreadable, but old, like she carried someone else's life behind them. Elena Vasquez, Marcus said. She gave a little curtsy, mocking. You've been searching for truths. That's brave. Most men your age just drink away what they're afraid to dig up. Who the hell are you? I asked, voice sharp. I'm the reason your names don't belong on this land, and the last living blood of Roberto Vasquez, the man your grandfathers killed and buried down here like bad luck. The words didn't hit like bullets. They hit like frost, deep, silent, killing from the inside. No, I said, weak. There's no record of... Because murder's only a record if someone dares to write it down. She walked past us, slow, her boots hardly whispering. At a far wall, she pressed on 2 stones in sequence. A panel slid inward with a groan. Behind it, another chamber. I couldn't breathe. The room smelled of damp and rust and something older, something dry and bitter. In the center lay a shallow pit, bones curled tight, like the person buried hadn't wanted to die. Beside the skull was a rusted compass, a rotted leather journal, and a blood-darkened handkerchief embroidered with the letter V. Olivia gasped. Marcus bowed his head. But I fell to my knees, because I'd seen that compass before, on my father's desk. He called it the lucky charm Granddad found buried on the East Ridge. It had always been his. That was the story. But stories lie. Elena knelt beside the pit, her voice even. Roberto Vasquez found this place. He dug the first shaft, mapped the seams, made the mistake of trusting 3 men who smiled too wide and drank too much. She held up the journal, pages dry but legible. He wrote everything. I've been reading his words since I was 15. Your grandfathers made a deal. When Roberto threatened to make it legal, they made him disappear. I looked at Olivia. Her hand trembled near her mouth. Marcus whispered, My grandfather said Roberto left for Mexico, that he wasn't suited to the cold. No, Elena said. He just wasn't suited to betrayal. She held up a paragraph in the journal. Here. He wrote, They think me blind, but I marked every board they moved, every barrel they stored. If I don't return from the meeting, tell my Elena the land is hers. My name didn't matter anymore. Langston, Harrow, Cross, none of us had inherited this land. We'd been squatting on a grave. Elena stood. I don't want your apologies. I don't want revenge. But I will take what's owed, and I'll bury him where the sun can touch his bones. No one argued, because for once, silence was the most honest answer any of us could give.
The next morning came up slow, with the kind of light that feels like judgment. We stood above ground now, same barn, same boards underfoot, but everything felt different, like the land itself knew what had been unearthed below. The air was still. Even the horses were quiet. Elena stood a few yards away, wrapped in a dark shawl, staring toward the rise where we'd agreed to bury her great-grandfather. The old cottonwood tree cast long shadows across the slope, and the freshly dug grave waited silently beneath it. I couldn't look at her without my chest clenching. Neither could Olivia, who stood with her arms crossed tight, her face red-rimmed and raw. Marcus, for once, said nothing at all. His hat stayed in his hands. A man who once thought himself part of a legacy now realized he'd only ever been holding stolen deeds. Elena didn't gloat. She didn't speak more than she had to. She simply handed us a document that her lawyer had drawn up. It bore all our names and all our signatures, transferring full ownership of the Langston Harrow Cross property to her family. Olivia's pen barely scratched as she signed. Marcus pressed so hard the nib cracked. When it came to me, I stared at the line with my name printed beneath it for a long while. I saw the ghost of my grandfather's hand in the way I held the pen, and for once, I let it go. I signed it clean. I'll sell off the cattle by week's end. The ranch house is yours as soon as you're ready. Elena nodded. I'm not staying here, she said. I'll hire a crew to level the old structure. Put something new in its place. A school, maybe? Or a clinic? Something useful. I swallowed hard. You're not keeping the vault. She smiled, tired. I don't need secrets anymore. I just need peace. Olivia stepped forward, tears tracking her dust-smudged cheeks. I'm sorry, Elena, for everything. You didn't kill him, Elena said gently, but you lived in the house that did, and now you've stepped out of it. That mercy sat heavy in the air. After the papers were filed in town, the notary gave us a strange look. You three sure you want to give up land like that? He asked. It's worth a fortune. Marcus just said, Not to me. Not anymore. We walked out of the courthouse like 3 exiles, but not from land, from lies. I looked over at Olivia as she mounted her mare. You heading back to Topeka? She nodded. Maybe, or maybe somewhere no one ever heard of the Harrows. Marcus just chuckled as he swung up into the saddle. Mind if I do the same? And that was it. No gunfights, no courts, no inheritance. Just the truth. And a shared silence that meant more than anything written on paper ever had.
I packed light. A few shirts, my father's old revolver, the compass I'd once believed was ours, and the truth tucked neatly into a letter I left on the mantel. The Langston name stayed behind on the mailbox. I wouldn't be needing it where I was headed. The morning I rode out, the prairie stretched wide and endless, golden grass dancing in the wind, as if nothing had ever happened, as if bones hadn't just been unearthed a few feet below. But I knew better. I stopped once at the grave beneath the cottonwood. Elena had buried him proper, carved his name into a wooden marker by hand. Roberto Vasquez, 1808 to 1852. A man betrayed, a man remembered. She'd wrapped his journal in leather and sealed it in a tin box beside the headstone. She said if anyone ever doubted again, they could read the truth for themselves. I tipped my hat and said nothing. Not because I didn't have words, but because words had already done enough harm. As I turned the horse west, I felt something loosen in my chest, a knot I didn't know had been tied since birth. It uncoiled with every hoofbeat. Every mile put distance between me and the lie I'd lived under. I could have fought to keep the land, hired lawyers, found loopholes, but it wasn't mine. Not really. And I was done pretending it was. What mattered now was what I built next. A town or two over, there was talk of railway expansion, new lines, new needs, new jobs. I figured I could swing a hammer like any other man, maybe build something without ghosts in the floorboards. As for Olivia, she wired me once, said she was teaching reading in a little schoolhouse near Leavenworth. Marcus sent a letter too. He'd bought a mule and started prospecting. He wrote, "Turns out I like digging, as long as the ground's honest." The last temptation came one night under the stars as I camped near a creek bed. I opened the satchel, pulled out the ring Olivia had shown us, the one with the 3 family symbols. I turned it in my fingers, wondering what kind of man would wear something like that, knowing what it meant. Then I dropped it in the creek and watched it sink into the mud. Legacy is a funny thing. Folks think it's about land or blood or names carved in wood. But the truth is, legacy's just the story you leave behind. And for the first time in my life, I was ready to write my own.